Gohan, the son of one of the most popular, strongest, and most prolific characters in anime history. First introduced within the first episode of the Dragon Ball Z series as a young boy, who would later make an incredible impact later on in the show. He trained with one of the strongest, once foe-turned-friend characters, Piccolo, took on some of the strongest villains throughout the series, was able to pull and acquire the famous Z-Sword, and had some of the most badass moments throughout the entire Dragon Ball Z series. It was once said that Gohan might even dethrone his father Goku's place as the new main character. After all, most if not all main characters within anime are suddenly replaced by secondary characters or their sons, because creators think it'll appeal to the new younger audiences. But unfortunately that never happened. Once Gohan was at his highest peak, he just quit training, became a college student, and hung up the Saiyan lifestyle. But what if that wasn't the case? What if he didn't study and become a scholar like his mom wanted, and continued training? This is Dragon Ball Media, and today we're going to dissect and take a look at what would have happened if Gohan would have continued training. But first, before we dive in, make sure to hit that bell and subscribe button so you don't miss any upcoming What If Dragon Ball videos. Make sure you leave a like so it'll let me know that you guys enjoyed this series, and comment down below after the video and tell me what you think. I'll also take suggestions on upcoming What If videos from you guys, and if I like your idea, I'll make a video on it and feature you. I appreciate you guys for watching. Now let's get into the video. So for starters, let's begin with young Gohan. I'll explain power levels, moves, and potentials because unlike his father, Gohan doesn't train constantly. In fact, he does take a lot of breaks in between different sagas. So we're going to include the possibility of each situation as if he didn't stop training in either one of those. To begin with, Gohan was born on May 18th, age 757, and according to volume 17 of the manga, he had a power level of just 1, which would follow him into the beginning of the Saiyan saga. Now, unlike Goku's childhood, where he was able to freely train and do whatever he wanted at will, Gohan had sort of the opposite. His mother Chi-Chi didn't want him doing antics and getting into fights or train with his father, even though from time to time he did it anyways. This would be one of the prime reasons he had such a low power level, and was also very shy. Once again, the complete opposite of his father. But things would quickly change when Raditz shows up and kidnaps him. During the fight with Raditz, Goku, and Piccolo, Raditz throws Gohan into a space pod, which is the first appearance of the beginning of his amazingly strong power. According to Raditz himself, he perceives Gohan as potentially being stronger than his father Goku when he became enraged and breaks free from the pod, delivering a gut-wrenching attack on Raditz. During this angry escapade, which eventually falls off by the way, Gohan's power level reaches 1307, which was more than doubled what Goku and Piccolo was. To put that into perspective, within volume 17 of the manga, Goku's power level was 416, and Piccolo's was 408. Even with Goku powering up and using his Kamehameha, his power level only peaked at 924, so it's incredibly insane that just getting Gohan angry would stagger such immense power. Fast forwarding a little bit, after seeing Gohan's potential, Piccolo takes Gohan and trains with him to combat in the upcoming battles with Vegeta and Nappa. Keep in mind that when Gohan became enraged with Raditz, his power level peaked at 1307, but when he began training with Piccolo and was left into the wilderness for 6 months to fend for himself, his power level went back down to 1. This was the beginning of the training, mind you. So between the fight with Raditz and before Vegeta's arrival, Gohan did a lot of training. Eventually, when the battle during the Saiyan saga takes place, Gohan, which is after all of the training he did with Piccolo, had a base power level of 981. Becoming enraged once again, due to the death of his friend Piccolo, he uses the move Masenko, which then leads him to reaching a peak power level of 2800. Both of these are stated within volume 18 and 19 of the mangas. Although Gohan's power level does seem a lot compared to his father's peak level before of 924, during the Raditz saga, Goku's base power level is 5000 with a peak of over 21,000 when using the Kaioken times 3 against Vegeta. Now, of course, Goku had a lot more to his disposal with training and gaining power level during this time compared to Gohan's wilderness training. Don't be undermined, as Gohan had a pretty impressive hike in peak power level, going from 1307 in the Raditz saga to 2800 in his fight against Nappa and Vegeta. During this whole time, he trained for most if not all of it as well. Now onto the Namek saga. We see one of Gohan's first situations where it could have been his downfall. After the fight with Vegeta, Gohan was pretty banged up and spent a majority of his time at the Wukong hospital in West City and was being babied by Chi-Chi, who made him get an embarrassing bowl haircut. What a cutie. Now, it's argued that if Gohan would have trained more with Piccolo during this time, he could have potentially grew his power level a little bit more, but I'm assuming Chi-Chi prevented him from doing so. Either way, there wasn't a lot going on at the time anyways, as everyone was slowly healing, but Gohan did manage to sneak away with Krillin and Bulma to planet Namek. Here we see Gohan fight some of Frieza's soldiers, and according to volume 21 of the manga, Gohan had a power level of 1500 during this time. We'll count this as base and peak power because there really wasn't more to showcase. So he went from having a base form of 981 in the Vegeta saga to 1500. A lot of people argue that when Gohan got the new bowl haircut look and went to Namek he became weaker, but obviously that wasn't the case. During the Captain Ginyu saga, we also see him amass a 10,000 power level when fighting Goldu and a 14,000 when fighting Raikkoon. What's interesting to take into consideration here is that between the Goldu and Raikkoon fight, we can see a 4,000 power level difference. One of the reasons we can contribute to that is because Gohan witnessed Vegeta being thrown around by Raikkoon, which could have spiked his power level out of anger. Between the Namek and Captain Ginyu saga, Gohan really doesn't do a whole lot of training, just does a little pity fights that help him with experience. Which is good considering if it were up to Chi-Chi, he would have been at home study. Fast forwarding to the Frieza saga, which we see Gohan's power level reach its highest yet. Witnessing Frieza kill Vegeta and also pick apart Piccolo, Gohan goes full beast mode and powers up to his full power Masenko move. Here we see his power level more than quadruple in size, as according to V-Jump magazine, 200,000 plus when enraged. Although this would be his strongest state yet, comparatively speaking amongst the others during this saga, it doesn't really match up at all, which is why Goku told Gohan to take the others and run. Goku at the time sporting a whopping 150 million power level within his Super Saiyan form, and Frieza's final form reaching 120 million. So Gohan's 200,000 power level is an insane increase from the previous sagas, but he's still nowhere close to the average levels amongst some of the other elites during this time. So after the fight with Frieza, everyone kind of went back to their old ways, Gohan included. As they wait for Goku's return, we see that Gohan doesn't really train a whole lot for a whole year during this time. One could argue that he did a little here and there training, but he was also with Chi-Chi at the time, so I'm assuming a lot of his time went to studying and what have you. This wouldn't really last too long though, as when Goku returns during the Trunks saga, we see that Gohan trains with Goku and Piccolo for the next 3 years. Now we're going to sum up his advancement within the Cell saga and Android saga, as this is the time when he trained a whole lot. During episode 80 of the anime titled The Tables Are Turned, Witness the Power of Perfection, we see that Gohan has mentally convinced himself that his friends depend on him and that he can't be weak anymore, hence where all the training came from during the 2 sagas. After training within the hyperbolic time chamber, he's able to amass Super Saiyan level. He's also honed the ability to make himself angry by reminiscing on times where he couldn't help his fellow friends as they were being killed. At this current state after reaching the Super Saiyan form, he has a total power level of 156 million, which is about 4 million less than his father. Goku's Super Saiyan form when training with Trunks on Namek is about 160 million. So with Gohan getting constant training, he has the capability to become so much stronger than anyone realizes. After leaving the hyperbolic time chamber, Gohan has a base power level of 50 million, which would put him higher than Goku at the time. Now before we go on to the Cell games, which will see the strongest form of Gohan yet, we need to do some figuring to put the number into perspective of what he is from his power and base to his angered state. Within the Raditz saga, he goes from a power level of 1 to 1307 when angry. During the Captain Ginyu saga, he went from one battle being 10,000 to the very next being 14,000 when angry. Then he went from a power level of 14,000 to 200,000 within the Frieza saga. Then from 200,000 to 156 million when angered within his Super Saiyan form. So combining anger and training, Gohan went from a peak power level of 1307 to 156 million, which is an insane 11,935,600% increase in power. That is absolutely insane, but it's about to get so much more crazy. Once the fight between Cell and Gohan takes place, Gohan masters his Super Saiyan transformation and amasses a power level of 2.5 billion. Now this would considerably be in his angered state, but as we further along, we see Cell kill Gohan's friend Android 16 and also witness the Cell Juniors beating up his friends. This triggers Gohan so much that he transforms into his Super Saiyan 2 form that hones a power level of 5 billion. So between the peak of Super Saiyan 1 and 2, we see a power level increase difference of 2.5 billion with an 100% increase. Fast forwarding 7 years after the Cell saga, we see that Gohan is now a scholar who completely gave up training. For 7 whole years. Now this is the most important part of the video, because after we've seen a peak power level of 2.5 billion, the sky was the limit for Gohan. But he completely gave that up over time. Let's take some things into perspective again really quick though. He went from having a power level of 1 at the age of 1 to having the peak power level of 2.5 billion when he killed Cell. Justifiably speaking, he was around the age of 10 if you don't count the year he spent in the time chamber. So with a rough estimate of a 10-year span, Gohan quitting training altogether for 7 whole years is over half of his youth during these major events, which is an insane amount of time to be giving up training as a whole. So what if he didn't stop training after the Cell games? Well, there's a few things we can take into perspective to give us a general idea of what he would have been doing, what his power level would have been, and overall what the peak of his abilities would be around this time if he wasn't off in school. Throughout his whole journey, Gohan primarily trained with his father, Vegeta, and Piccolo. Unfortunately, we can't necessarily say he would have been off training with his father, as Goku was in the other world, so we'll scratch him off the list. Next is Vegeta. We can't really put Gohan in a reality involving him training with Vegeta, because after the Cell Saga, Vegeta states that he isn't going to fight anymore, and that his pride was pretty much gone after he was unable to do anything within those fights. Also, with Vegeta having the amount of pride that he has, I don't think he'd want to train with Gohan, as at the end of the Cell Saga, Gohan has surpassed Vegeta and Goku's power level. So that just leaves Piccolo. What's unfortunate about this scenario is that Piccolo's power level, or at least his overall impact, didn't really grow substantially or let alone at all from his time fighting Cell to Buu. So it can be argued that Piccolo really didn't do a whole lot of training during that 7 years after Cell's death either. It is referenced within the Dragon Ball Z and even Super that Piccolo and Gohan do have this best friend type of friendship. So if Gohan really wanted to continue training, Piccolo most definitely would have partooken. The only problem though is during that 7 years Gohan quit training, there really wasn't any immediate threat. Not to mention Gohan already mentally knew that he was stronger than Goku and Vegeta, so what was there really to train for? If he was to train with Piccolo, in my opinion, I don't think he would have grown that much more in power level. I think he would have grew a little bit, but learning new moves or growing to a new transformation probably wouldn't have happened because there was nothing to make Gohan angry. Unfortunately, we're going to have to cross out training with Piccolo as well. I've seen within forums while doing research for this video of people having the opinions that pertain to most of the Z fighters, but notably Gohan. I've seen a lot of people make the argument it wouldn't have mattered if Gohan trained because he wouldn't have grown that much, or there's not really a threat to make him angry during this time, so there's really no use of him doing so. But there's one thing people seem to forget. The first time Gohan went into his Super Saiyan form, it was after training within the hyperbolic time chamber. So training especially within this chamber can definitely increase the potential power level, let alone help you hone in on new body transformations. So if Gohan was to train anywhere, the time chamber would have been a perfect place he would have started at. It's unknown how much potential level he would have gained during his second time within the chamber, but his base power level during the Frieza saga was 200,000. After leaving the time chamber, he had a base power level of 50 million, which is a 24,900% increase. So with a 50 million base power level on top of a 2.5 billion at peak after leaving the time chamber, having a second go round could definitely make a huge difference. With simple math on our side, we can averagely conclude that one time chamber visit can have a max of 2.5 billion increase. So with 2 visits, we'd have right around 5 billion in power level. But let's push the limits on this. So with DBZ logic, the hyperbolic time chamber can only be used by an individual twice in their lifetime. But in the Dragon Ball Super series, we see Goku and Vegeta use it multiple times. We'll go off this logic just to make it more fun. Also, we must take into consideration that one day in the real world is a whole year in the chamber. So let's just say Gohan went into the chamber 6 more times after the Cell Saga. Using these figures, we can conclude that Gohan, after 6 times within the time chamber, would come out with an average peak power level of around 15 billion. So now that we have a general idea of what Gohan's power level would have been if he continued to train in that 7 years using the hyperbolic time chamber, let's put that into the events that followed throughout the rest of the show. Gohan's next encounter with a main villain is Dabura. Within the Daizenshuu 7 book, it's said that Dabura has a power level of similar to Cell. It doesn't say specifically which Cell, but we'll just go with the 2 highest forms. That being his perfect power weighted form and his super perfect Cell form. Unfortunately, that still is only 4.5 to 5 billion in power level, which means Gohan would have easily been able to defeat Dabura. The next main villain comes across is Majin Buu or Fat Buu. This would have also sort of been a cakewalk, as Fat Buu only has a power level somewhere around 10 billion. So in essence, Gohan would have been able to take him out as well. Goku states that he could have easily beaten Majin Buu with his Super Saiyan 3 transformation, which has a power level of 24 billion, so Gohan shouldn't have that much of an issue with it. We must also include Gohan's time with the Kais when he's able to reach his Super Saiyan form with the Z-Sword. During this state, he has a power level of 4.2 billion. So we'll just add that onto the already 15 billion, which comes out to roughly 19.2 billion in power level. Unfortunately for Gohan though, this doesn't really suffice Super Buu, who has a power level of 32 billion. Of course, none of that would have been the case since Gohan would have been able to defeat Fat Buu, so we'll just leave it at that. You can understand why the development team wanted Gohan to set out those 7 years. A lot of the Z timeline would have been a lot different if he would have kept training during that time. First off, some of the main villain timelines involving Babidi and Buu would have been the same, and he would have easily surpassed Goku as the strongest character within the Z Fighters group. Of course, Goku wouldn't just sit back and let that happen, but it seems as though the creators knew how popular Goku was at the time, so it only made sense for one of the main characters that could have surpassed him as the main character was put on the back burner. It's unfortunate too, because when you take into consideration that his potential power level could have been 19 billion, going into Dragon Ball Super, potential Unleashed Gohan amassed a 42 billion in power level, which would have put him around 61 billion mark. That's still nowhere near Goku's power level at the end of Super, so really if Gohan continued training, it wouldn't have made a vastly superior of a difference. And we can finally put this conclusion to rest, or at least my opinion. I have done enough evidence to conclude that it wouldn't have made that big of a difference. Maybe within the Dragon Ball Z timeline it would have changed a lot of differences, especially with Majin Buu and that whole saga, but when it comes to the Dragon Ball Super series, there really wouldn't have been a lot of difference if Gohan would have trained during that 7 years he took off during the Great Saiyaman saga. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe. Make sure to check out the rest of the What If series that I have on my channel, where we dissect and conclude what would happen if certain things happen within the Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball Super series. This has been Dragon Ball Media, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video.